brookeboothcoaching.com, mormoncouples.com. Deal with their faith transition. So we're going to talk about this great concept I love, selfishness, right? I think the single biggest fear of marriage is the fear of being selfish, acting selfish, being perceived as selfish. I mean, frankly, this word selfish in the LDS context, in marriage context, I think is a bad word. Culturally speaking, we see it as something that's bad, especially when you're talking about marriage. So first thing I like to do when really diving into something like this is let's look at this word. How are we defining it? How are you defining it? And, is that definition, does it even make sense? So let's look. Let's take a closer look at this word and what it means, and most importantly, how it's impacting your mixed faith marriage. Okay, so a pretty common use of the word selfishness is when you put yourself, your needs, your wants above others. So mostly in the context we're talking about above your spouses, right? And many people, I know, would agree that it's a really good thing to not be selfish. It's a really good thing. In fact, it's necessary for a healthy marriage to put your spouse's needs and wants above your own. And I'm not going to disagree with this. But the problem is, I often see what happens is we take this further than we need to. We're going to be so good. We're going to be the most unselfish spouse that ever was. And what happens is we take it, we're so afraid of being selfish that we act kind of crazy. And what I mean is we think that if we ever take our wants and our needs into consideration, that we're being selfish. Now hear me on this. So what happens is we put others first all of the time. All of the time. If you're a female, I'm guessing this is happening to you. And I know it happens to males too. I have heard it from my clients. So what happens is we do this even to our detriment, and frankly to the detriment of our marriage and that relationship. We neglect ourselves. We neglect our self-development, our own maturation. We neglect our desires, and I'm talking about those healthy desires that are part of being alive on this planet. We become, we take this to the extreme and we do this year after year after year. It compounds and we become a shell of a person in our relationship. We forget to take care of ourselves in our relationship. We are so afraid that we'll be selfish that we become people pleasers, really thinking our purpose in this relationship is to help others feel good about themselves, but really we're showing them that by taking care of ourselves, that means we're being selfish. It gets a little crazy. And in the most extreme cases, we become, the proverbial doormat. Now let's talk about this because there's other things going on here that I don't think we often see. What's really ultimately happening when we take this selfishness and we never put ourselves, we never take our own wants and needs into consideration, we never put ourselves, quote unquote, first, is that we now are creating like what I like to call a one-up, one-down dynamic in our relationship. We're becoming inferior. They're always put first. It really creates this hierarchy in an effort, and I realize a very good effort, not to be selfish. So we basically are creating a relationship in inequality, where one partner is always put above the other. And this creates trouble. It creates resentment, frustration, creates unmet expectations, and frankly, it's just not healthy and it's just not enjoyable, even if it feels familiar. And often it does feel familiar. So let's talk about my definition of selfishness. This definition is when you put yourself above others because you think you're better or more important than them. This is very different than the previous definition. This is very different. Because the idea behind a really great marriage, especially a really great mixed faith marriage, is that both partners are equal. They're partners, right? That there's a true partnership. And when you've got this selfishness kind of dynamic where the other person's needs are always getting put above your own, that is not equality and that is not partnership, right? That's a hierarchy. So again, the whole goal here is to really create a powerful place where marriages can thrive. And one of the most important, aspects of that is this partnership key. And so does it feel like your marriage has this one up, one down dynamic that I'm talking about here? Or that someone has the power and gets to call all the shots? Now, I'll tell you, there was a point in my relationship, both my husband and I thought the other person had all the power. I'm talking like at the exact same time, because this is how it works. We were both trying so hard to not be selfish. We were people pleasing, experts at it, trust me. But we were both so miserable and resentful of the other person. Now, this is not a happy, healthy place to be. The thought is, I'm doing all of this for you. Why can't you just fill in the blank? It was ironic and it was a bit of a farce. So, is this happening in your marriage? So often we want to avoid marriage issues by being unselfish, but in reality, we end up causing more problems because we're not ultimately showing up authentically, honestly, and more importantly, as equal partners. And we may even devolve into something of a victim role, where my husband and I found ourselves. So I want you to consider this. This is often kind of a tricky little sneaky issue I see in mixed faith marriages, really in all marriages. Kind of sneaks in there because we tell ourselves, but there's nothing wrong with this, when maybe there really is. It's not really that you're being unselfish, it's that you're not being an equal partner or letting your spouse be an equal partner. And like I said, with my husband and I, sometimes the rules people take off and put on this hat. So I want you to consider this may not be one of the obvious problems that you may see, but it is a problem. Are you selfish or just super afraid of being selfish, which I think is probably the bigger issue? I have a whole exercise that I do with my clients around this concept of selfishness because I think it's one that needs to really be looked at, and one that is often covered up and ignored because we just have a hard time even understanding that being like this aversion to selfishness can be causing problems in our marriage. But it can, especially when resentment and frustration and inequality are the result of it. So if this is an issue that needs to be addressed in your marriage so it can really thrive, let's talk. Reach out to me at brookeboothcoaching.com and just click on the button, free call with Brooke. We'll set up a time to get on a call and really talk about your mixed faith marriage. I go through this really fun little mini exercise. Find out where you are in your marriage, where you want to be, because it's totally mixed faith marriage. Reach out to me and let's talk. And let's figure out selfishness, or really the fear of being selfish, is causing you to not get the results you want in your marriage. Okay, wishing you the best.